just with this stat in mind, that 71% of people say it's very important for a man to be able to support a family financially, to be a good husband or partner.
Mm-hmm.
If we get to a point, which is kind of the trajectory we're on, where women and men are earning the same. Women already have more sort of college degrees than men by about, I think it's roughly about 10% at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
roughly. We're going to find ourselves where, expectations for what a man can offer are really, really high, but reality is really low. And then it feels like that the amount of women that are not finding what they want is going to continue to increase. And the amount of men that don't feel like they are good enough for a woman because they're not smart enough, they don't have enough money, they can't contribute in the same way, is also going to increase. But then also with general working dynamics, we're seeing that people are getting married later and later, they're having less and less kids. So are you at all concerned about this trajectory?
Yes, very. Because I think it leaves a lot of people who really want a partner and could really enjoy having a partner who maybe is different from what this cultural norm is. They don't go after that. So a woman will say, oh, I'm not going to even go on a date with this guy because he's not successful enough. We're too different. And a man, on the other hand, might say, I'm not going to even go on a date with her because she's so focused on her career, or, or I'm not good enough for her. So they don't even get a chance to even see if they might be a good match. And sometimes it's a great match because you don't necessarily want two people who are exactly the same. And I see this all the time with couples who come in for couples therapy, where they thought that what was so good about their relationship when they first got together was we're so the same. And then they find that, wait a minute, but there's no one here to be more of the nurturer, or there's no one here to spend more time with the household, or there's no one here to do more of kind of the logistical things in the house because we're both doing exactly the same job.
I was going to say, isn't that sort of central to the equality narrative that you should share the responsibilities?
Right. So equality doesn't mean that you have exactly the same responsibilities. It means that you feel that there's not a power dynamic. So equality means one person doesn't have more power than the other person. But that doesn't mean that, I do laundry 2.5 days of the week or 3.5 days of the week, and you do laundry 3.5 days of the week. Maybe someone only does their responsibility is the laundry. That doesn't mean that there's a power dynamic. It means the other person, maybe they're always doing the dishes or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be split up in this way. So I think that when people think about having an egalitarian marriage, we're talking about that there's not a power differential, but you still get to choose. Like a woman might say, and I'm being stereotypical here, it might be the man, but often it's the woman who says, you know what, I want to switch to part-time with my work. So that doesn't mean she has less power in the marriage because he makes more now because he's working full-time. It means that they've divided up things differently because that was their choice. That was something that was chosen. It wasn't like you can't work. It was, I would like to do less.
Do you tend to see issues unique to relationships when a woman is earning more than a man?
Yeah, I do. I still think this is something that is very primal for us around, what it means. I think that women sometimes feel resentful. That's why they want to be with someone. It's funny because a woman can be making a lot of money and she won't even go out with someone who makes the same amount. She has to go out with someone who makes more, which is interesting because she won't necessarily say that. I think it's hard to acknowledge the contradictions. And I think for men, the same thing, that a man will say, I want a woman who has her own life. I want somebody who is doing something in the world that is important to her, but I don't want her to make more money than me. It's hard to say that out loud. This comes out in couples therapy where people start talking about, wow, there is this difference. And maybe it didn't even start out that way. Maybe it started out where he was making more and then things shifted and then she started making more and it changed something in their dynamic. And so they start fighting a lot, but they're not fighting about that. They're fighting about all different kinds of things. And so it comes out in different behaviors. And they come to couples therapy saying, we're fighting all the time, or we're not having sex, or here's what's happening. And it turns out it was really about this issue of who has power now. But they didn't realize it was about that, or they weren't willing to kind of look at that.
Do you think it's getting increasingly harder to know what the role of a man and a woman are? Because I think, I've had so many conversations on and off this podcast with people who have sons or daughters. It's often the ones that have sons. I'm thinking about a lady that I know. And she says she's so confused by what to tell her son a man is these days. And, when I think about suicidality and how much of a big killer it is, especially in the UK, I know it's sort of a Western trend, but I think it's the biggest killer of men under the age of 45 is themselves. I'm thinking, there's often a narrative that that's because masculinity is changing. They're not being masculine enough. And then there's another narrative that says, no, it's because they're not being feminine enough. What's typically associated with sort of feminine traits.
Yeah. Well, it's true that more men die by suicide than women do. And some people say, well, that's because the method that men choose is more lethal. But I also think that that's only part of the story, because when men do come into therapy, they truly, truly feel that conflicted about exactly what you said, that I don't know how to be a man in today's world. It used to be much more clear. Now, I'm not saying that was a good thing that it used to be much more clear, because there were all kinds of power dynamics that weren't so healthy for men and women. But I think now what men are saying is, I maybe don't want to be the person solely responsible for, I would like my partner to also bring in some income, but, that creates all kinds of problems. Or I want